and welcome to the Sunday Standard News Review. My name is Spencer Mogapi, and today we are joined by the Director General for the DCEC, Mr. Tymon Katlholo. And we will be discussing a lot of issues surrounding corruption in Botswana. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Tymon Katlholo, for having agreed to join us in our interview.
Thank you, Spencer Mogapi, for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to be your guests.
Yes.
We really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Corruption is a big political issue in the country. As you know, you have been with the DCEC before and you have currently there for the second time around. Can you just tell us what do you want to achieve now that you have not achieved in your first tenure as the Director General at DCEC?
The one thing that I would want to achieve is to inculcate integrity in the management of public affairs.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the question that you should ask yourself, why do you combat corruption? Why is it important, to combat corruption?
Yes.
You combat corruption because you want to promote good governance. And it is through good governance that you are also able to combat corruption. So that is exactly what I would want to achieve. Make sure that by the time I leave, at least I would have inculcated that sense to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because fighting corruption requires a multifaceted approach, not just one single approach. So inculcate that sense in Botswana generally, that to combat corruption, you need to make sure that the way you manage your resources, the more you manage your office, the more the way you do things is aligned to the whole concept of good governance.
You were one of the founders of DCEC, and you stayed there for a very long time. Are you implying that during that time you could not achieve what you are now saying you want to achieve in your current contract?
No, not necessarily. You see, we are starting. And if you remember or recall, corruption was almost foreign. It was something that was not common in Botswana.
Yes.
So we had to. I think the thing that broke the camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back, was the Bhc Scandal, right? That is where we started to see these issues of corruption creeping in. And the past 5 years, the first 5 years, we're actually mobilizing, trying to build a path to bring it to a sustainable level. So we're running at the same time as we're building. So a lot of mistakes could have happened. A lot of things could have not been achieved. But this is not to say that we did not achieve anything. Because if you remember, we're an envy of a lot of countries. A lot of countries came here to benchmark from us, despite the fact that we are starting.
It would be very interesting while you are on that point for me to ask you, since you came in now for the second time around, what is your assessment on the level of corruption in Botswana? Because we have been the envy, like you're saying, but there are now creeping doubts on whether even that envy was worth it. Was it really truthful? We were told that we were the least corrupt, at least in Africa, but people are now doubting if we ever were.
Yes, I think I still maintain that we still have low levels of corruption. Comparatively. Because if you look at our statistics, starting from, say, 1995, when we had a full swing of our statistics, and you look at the number of reports that came to the DCEC, it is only 30% that would warrant investigation. But 70% of those did not warrant investigation. And even now, the situation is still the same. The reason why we have we seem to have maybe what we have declined is because when you compare us with say the Seychelles, they made some very good strides, right, in terms of improving governance. And Rona, for some times we stagnated, right? We remained at one place. And then as a result, we were overtaken by the Seychelles. So that is one other point. The second point is that even now, before I came here, I was looking at our latest statistics, 2019, 2020, and even up to today. So the trend is the same, that only 30% of the reports that come to the DCEC warrant investigation.
So you basically are saying the public perceptions that corruption is rife in Botswana, they are misplaced.
Yeah, I'll explain that.
Yes.
I'll explain the difference. The difference is here. Yes, if you talk in terms of sophistication and complexity, I'll say yes, corruption has increased. Because what do you see now? We see issues of money laundering. We see issues, we see now people engaging in large sums of money, things like that. Whereas in the past, yes, it was just small figures. But now we're talking what? Millions.
Yes, yes.
Because the economy is also growing. So that is another factor that you should also consider. Because development, corruption sometimes comes with the developments. The more you develop, the more, or even crime in general, the more you develop, the more you see crime becoming sophisticated and all the like.
Sophisticated and complex.
And complex.
And those are the catchwords.
Yes.
Can you now talk about DCEC? Just how ready is DC itself under the circumstances, sophistication, complexity, to deal with such crimes?
We are ready in the sense that if you look at the staffing levels of the DCEC, we now have more graduates than before. I mean, right away now, I'm talking of about 13 lawyers in the DCEC. I'm talking of engineers, I'm talking of accountants, and all the like. So I would say that 90% of the DCEC staff are graduates. This was not the case when we started. We have more people who are not graduates than now. And the other thing, our readiness, theory, we are looking at our internal processes. So we have embraced things like total quality management. We have embraced instruments like monitoring and evaluation. Why do we do that? We need to make sure that we create that environment of integrity within the DCEC first. And once we have done that, internally, we need to do that because it is critical. It is critical in the sense that for you, Mogapi, to have confidence in us, you have to see that level of integrity. So that is why it is important that we should work within first now, because make no mistake, yes, we are dented. I mean, in the past, you can't hide it, right? And we to some extent, we have lost public confidence. So if you look at our strategic plan, public confidence, restoring public confidence is one of the main objectives that we are driving at. That is why we have these tools like total quality management, where we are now almost at the point where we are about to register with the Bureau of Standards, right? to certify for ISO 9015, so that everything that we do, one, will be accounted for, two, will be informed by the standards that we have, three, will be guided by the values, the corporate values that we have in the organization.
Let's talk, before you even get there, let's talk first about the act that created DCEC, under which you operate yourself. And the concern for the public is that if the Director General of DCEC does not have a clear security of tenure, if the position itself is not protected and entrenched in the Constitution, the public will always be unwilling and always suspicious to give their confidence. So, talking out to the act itself, can you just say what are the key issues that you think need to be changed now since you established as DCEC?
Well, the issue of the security of tenure, I've talked about it before. During our early days, and even after I retired, I still talked about it, and I'm still talking about it now.
It's a big elephant in the room.
Yeah, because that is the most important thing in the fight against corruption, or in an organization like ours. That security of tenure, it's key. So if it is something that I'm advocating for, it is something that I've engaged in my principles, and I think the environment is conducive, I'll put it that way. So we are looking at the law and maybe not in the too distant future, we'll be pushing some amendments to make sure that the DCEC is aligned to that concept of accountability, is aligned to that concept of trustworthiness.
So you would agree with me, for example, when I say under the current law, DCEC and also the Director General, they are not fully insulated from political interference?
Well, I would say it is susceptible.
It is susceptible.
Yeah, I think that is the answer. But otherwise, if you look at the act itself, like I said, there are some shortcomings in it. But otherwise, again, when you interrogate the act quite strictly, it is saying that anyone who interferes with the operational independence of the DCEC, they're actually committing an offense.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the little insulation that you can talk about. But you see, interference can come in many ways. Sometimes it will be it will come in a subtle way, right? Which then would not be possible to be able to invoke that particular section, right? Again, the other point which I would like to Mogapi would answer. So when in your view, what would you consider to be an ideal arrangement for the operational independence of an organization like the DCEC?
No, obviously I'm not supposed to answer questions, but I would tell you that my view is that the Director General, especially as the top person there, should have a clear security of tenure.
That we agree.
Yeah, and without it, when you can be removed either by the President or the PSP and not Parliament, then the whole organization, when there are some employees inside the organization under which you operate, fully responsible for operations, they can be removed elsewhere, not by you. So those are the issues that people are talking about. But I want to move to another question.
Okay.
The issue would be relations. And here I'm talking also to the public perceptions about DC, that there is a big issue because if DCEC is going to operate optimally, it has to have good relations with other organizations like DPP for prosecutions, DIS for intelligence, for example, and the Botswana police also for investigations and the like. So can you tell us where is the perception and where is the reality about the inter-organizational relations between these three organizations, for example?
Well, You are very right. There is what you call interagency cooperation. I think that is very, very important and very key in the fight against corruption. But interagency cooperation does not mean interference or encroachment into one another's territory. But to answer your question more specifically, now I don't think there is any strained relationship as per the perception, public perception. I think we had one incident whereby we did not agree. We only agreed to disagree because we looked at things differently. And some people held their own views. We had our own views. And it was only proper that if we held a certain view or position, then we should be able to say, no, this is not right. We can't go this way because this is what the law says. So it was just a question of disagree on certain issues. Not that that working relationship is not there. So even next week I'll be meeting the DPP. We'll be discussing some issues. So the DPP cannot function without the DCEC. The DCEC cannot function without the DPP because we investigate, they prosecute. The DCEC cannot function without the courts.
Yes.
Because that is where issues are determined. That is where certain pronouncements are made. But what is important is that we have to observe the rule of law.
The DCC, to be fair, maybe to yourselves, you can only do so much. But there is also need for political will, and it has to be clear that there is political will to fight corruption. You were there before. Now, what would you say about your comparisons between political will when you started DCEC and now?
Well, I would say political will is there. I mean, we are provided for in terms of resources. Recently, we have just opened an office in Palape, and we have a satellite office in Khansi. But when you talk about political will, it is relative. You have to look at it from all sectors of the economy. What do we mean by political will? We mean adoption of a culture of prudent management and practices that simply discourages corruption. That is political will. So maybe that is the question that you are asking. But I would say, yes, to that extent, political will is there. And political will cut across all sectors, cut across all institutions. So now I'm given the responsibility at the DCEC. Somebody else is given the responsibility as Minister of Finance. Somebody else is given responsibility at the political level. Do they practice those prudent management or do they apply those prudent management principles where they can say we have the checks and balances to make sure that public resources are managed prudently.
And they do not interfere with investigations.
Yes, and they do not interfere with the investigation. That's true. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Botswana is just emerging now from the state of emergency, which was quite controversial. There were too many fights around it, including at political level, but also across society. People felt that there was a lot of corruption, that the state of emergency basically enabled corruption. What has been the reports like, and what are your investigations like? And here I'm talking about also the numbers, also maybe the sophistication and complexity that you earlier talked about with regards to specific cases that emerged out of the state of emergency.
Well, I think during the duration of the state of emergency, we received altogether 67 complaints.
And that's a lot or not?
67 complaints.
Complaints?
Complaints. Some of those complaints we pick them up from the media, right?
Mhm.
And then it is only 27 of those complaints that we are looking into. So I'll leave that to your own judgment.
But ordinarily, would you think 27 within that period, is it a is it a big number or not?
Well, I wouldn't say, but I would also be concerned. Why? Because you see, you had to make some relaxation in terms of the procurement methods. And obviously, when you make those relaxations, the tendency is that some people would fall by the wayside, would take advantage, right? Would take advantage of the system. So, to that extent, I would say that I would also be concerned. But when you look at the total number, then it doesn't tell you that, yes, the problem was a big issue, or corruption was a big issue during the state of emergency.
Let's talk, I'll take you back again to the public perceptions generally about DC itself, because without support, direct support from the public, I cannot see DCEC achieving much. How are you able to attract the kind of people, especially the graduate level, that you'd want? Because I remember as a young graduate, we wanted to work for DC at the time. Are you still able to attract quality and caliber that you would want at DCEC? Or the people have just moved on because they feel, no, DCEC is no longer the best organization to work for under the circumstances?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier on that in the early days, I would say 80% of the DCEC staff were non-graduates.
Yes.
But now, 90% are graduates. And I think that the question that you are going to pose is, no, you have 90% because there are no jobs. But let me just give you this scenario. I think on average, every week we receive applications from other departments, people wanting to join the DCEC, and these are graduates.
Yes, and as we approach the conclusion, can you just tell us exactly what have you set for yourself personally? What do you want to achieve? What do you want your legacy to be remembered at DCEC?
I would want to maintain the integrity that I've preached. I'm preaching integrity because I believe that if you have to kill corruption almost instantaneously, you have to inculcate that sense of integrity because it kills corruption almost like instantaneously. Kore, I've always likened this to Utsutse Doom.
I hope that includes also cutting and stopping the leakages that are now often associated with these intelligence organizations, including yourself.
Yes. Utsutse Doom. Corruption ke lefele. Doom ke integrity. Where tra lefela ke leso.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cartolo.
Thank you, Mogapi, and everyone.